guys, what is up and welcome back to another video. As you guys have seen in the thumbnail and in the description below, today's video is going to be my 6 months review of the M1 MacBook Pro. For those of you who don't know, I'm actually using the M1 MacBook Pro with the 16GB of RAM and 256GB of SSD for close to 6 months now. I actually got this MacBook before I started my YouTube journey. So this MacBook, I didn't really bought it to do video editing or any other Final Cut Pro activities, but I ended up doing it. Today's review is mainly about my experience using Final Cut Pro and using all those softwares, and of course basic browsing and everything else. So at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you guys if you should get this MacBook or you should go and get the 14 and 16 inch. Of course this is definitely up to your own preferences and up to your needs, but I'm just going to tell you guys my opinion, or if you should get the $3,000 MacBook, or if you just go with this $2,000 M1 MacBook Pro. So without further ado, let's get started into the video. So starting off, I just want to talk about the technical specifications of this MacBook. My MacBook is a silver color MacBook with 16GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. So here's the MacBook. For me, I got it in a silver color. So first let's talk about the screen here. So the screen on this MacBook is actually very vibrant. So I've actually been using it for video editing mostly, and of course I've been using this to watch a lot of YouTube contents. Of course, for some of you guys, this might be a small screen. So to show these colors of this screen, let's play some HDR content, and let me just show you guys the screen here. So here's some HDR content playing on this MacBook here, and the colors are actually really vibrant here. I hope you guys can see it on camera. There isn't any blooming issues. There isn't any blooming issues like the iPad Pro or the new MacBooks. I didn't really notice any blooming issues here in my 6 months of using this MacBook, but some of my friends using the same MacBook as me have experienced blooming issues here and there, but for me it hasn't really happened. So there isn't much to talk about the screen. So now let's move on to the keyboard, and I want to show you guys how the experience is using this keyboard. The keyboard on the new MacBook Pros are great, especially for typing and for editing, and of course I use the keyboard for editing, for shortcuts and all, and the keyboard has been actually pretty good for me. The main issues for me was the trackpad and the touch bar. So the problem with the touch bar has frozen a few times. It has frozen for me about 3 to 4 times in this course of 6 months. Well, that isn't really a lot to complain about, but I just want to mention it here. The trackpad is actually not frozen for me, but it has had delays. It wasn't really responding in real time as I was using it, but this hasn't actually happened every single time. It just happened around 2 to 3 times for me. But after I restarted my MacBook, it started working perfectly and there wasn't any hiccups after that. So the trackpad issue and the touch bar issue that I mentioned were just software issues, and there wasn't any hardware issues with it. I got them checked using the Apple hardware test. I did run the hardware test a few times when my touch bar actually froze, and after I ran the test, it was working properly, and the same goes for the trackpad too. But these issues happened to me only when I was using macOS Monterey in the beta stages. It wasn't happening to me on Big Sur, so I'm just going to take these as the software issues, but I just want to mention it here as part of the review. So now I just want to cover the touch bar quickly. I know a lot of you don't like the touch bar, you guys like functional keys. I just want to mention the touch bar here really quickly, so let's get to that. The touch bar is my most loved feature on this MacBook Pro due to how I can customize these keys and I can actually change them whichever way I want. So I don't have to be stuck with these functional keys that Apple provides with the basic functions that is inbuilt. So I can actually customize my touch bar here. Of course, I know a lot of you guys don't like the touch bar and you guys like the functional key, but for me the touch bar has been really helpful, especially when editing videos, so I can just quickly crop it from here. I've actually got my timestamp here. So of course all of you guys would have known about how the touch bar works and all, but I just want to show you guys how the touch bar has actually helped me a lot. So during editing, if I want to crop it or if I want to move footages here, I can just click it like that rather than me clicking on the keyboard and actually cropping those footages. So that has really been a hassle, but now I can just click on the touch bar and I can just get the footages cropping in and out. So the touch bar has really made my life easier, especially to edit faster. It has basically helped me use my trackpad less, that's what I would say. So I don't really have to move my trackpad a lot. I can just use my fingers and just tap the touch bar and I'm just good to go, and my work is actually done from the touch bar. So I really love the touch bar, but I'm actually saddened that Apple has actually removed the touch bar. The touch bar has been really helpful for me in the MacBook Pro, but now sadly it's gone. With me done praising this MacBook, I just want to talk about the swap usage quickly, because a lot of you guys know the M1 MacBook has actually a lot of swap issues here, and the swap issues are yet to be resolved. Because the other day I actually had this Safari tab running in the background, so I didn't have any videos playing. It was just a basic Safari window, and I had it running in the background, so it wasn't playing anything, it was just minimized, and I totally forgot about it. And when I remembered and opened it after around 5 to 6 hours, I went to check my RAM usage and it was at 13 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes was my MacBook and it was at 13 gigabytes. It actually used around 4 to 5 gigabytes of swap usage, so it was actually running on my SSD. It's still my forgetfulness of closing the tab, but of course swap usage has been really bad because I have a 16GB MacBook and it was actually running at 13 gigabytes with swap usage at around 4 to 5 gigabytes. And even when using Final Cut Pro, when I have all my tabs closed, I have my Safari closed, I have my WhatsApp closed, I have my email, I have every single app on quit, and I only have Final Cut Pro running. And even then, my RAM usage is at about 10 gigabytes. That's actually quite optimal for this MacBook. And my apps actually use about 4 gigabytes, but my swap usage was actually running at 3 gigabytes. So that was really a lot. I actually tried a lot of workarounds, like not using Rosetta 2 for Intel apps. So I only have one Intel apps running, I think. So I will show you guys in a minute. But I only have one Intel app running through Rosetta 2, and the rest of the apps are all Apple Silicon or Universal apps. I tried my best to reduce swap usage, but it has been really bad on the M1, and Apple said that they will resolve it with a software update. It's been 1 year since the MacBook released, and the swap issue is still bad. So I think it's about this hardware right now and not the software. I think we are still going to keep having swap issue even in the long run. So let me just quickly show you my activity monitor so that you guys can see. So right now I have none of the apps open. So let me just quit all my apps here and we'll see. So now I have quit all my apps except my Finder and my activity monitor. And now the swap usage is at 332 gigabytes. This is less compared to other days, but it's still, see? So the compressed data has been moved to SSD, but why? I have 6 gigabytes of memory used with 3 gigabytes of cache file, but my physical memory is 16 gigabytes, so I still have around 6 gigabytes to use and still using swap. If some of you find this astonishing, this is actually very less compared to the other days, because the other days I have had 3 to 4 gigabytes when I'm running Final Cut Pro usually, and I've actually gone up to 10 gigabytes. I do not know how, but I've actually run up to 10 gigabytes of swap usage. Of course, I do agree that Apple's SSD are great and the transfer speeds are great, but I'm still quite skeptical about how this life of this MacBook is going to be, especially in the long run, because I'm planning to actually keep this MacBook and not sell it. Well, of course, fingers crossed. I hope I don't get any SSD failures because of this swap usage, but we have to see how. So now with that done, I want to talk about my editing experience on the M1 MacBook Pro. So this is the timestamp that you guys see in my videos. So now I've upscaled this to a 4K 30 frames, and let's export this video. So I'm going to export this to YouTube and Facebook, and I'm going to upscale this to 4K. Let's click export and let's wait for it to export it. The clip has now been exported. It did take some time due to me turning off my renders. The time taken was 1.5 minutes, so it's actually quite a lot, but that's because due to me turning off my renders. So now with the export done, I want to talk about my coding experience on this. For me, I use Swift, and that app has been of no issues to me. So previously on my Intel MacBook Air, Swift would lag and it would actually thermal throttle my MacBook Air a lot, and the fan would be spinning at full speed. It will be blasting out air. I've had coding for 2 to 3 hours, and this MacBook has never been hot. It has been cool to the touch. Now I want to talk about the thermal throttling issues. I've actually experienced thermal throttling a few times, and that has been mainly during my video editing. Whenever I'm using Final Cut Pro for about 2 to 3 hours, this thermal throttling happens. But other than that, whenever I'm using Final Cut Pro for very basic stuff, it has no issues with that. But the MacBook does get very hot when I'm actually exporting my footages. And to prevent that, it has been very easy. I just got a cooling pad and I'm using it for my editing. So whenever I edit, I turn on that cooling pad and I put my MacBook on top, and the thermal throttling issue is gone. I recommend you get a cooling pad for your MacBook. Do not connect it to the battery of your MacBook. So plug it into an external source, power socket or battery power bank, so as to not increase the battery consumption of this MacBook. Battery should really be appreciated, because the battery on this MacBook has been the biggest advantage for me. On my previous MacBook, I had to charge my MacBook twice or thrice a day if I want to get through Zoom meetings. If I want to get through normal web browsing, I have to charge it for twice a day. And if I want to get through Zoom meetings, I should charge my MacBook 3 times a day. That has been on my Intel MacBook, but on this M1 MacBook, I charge my MacBook twice a day when I'm not editing. So when I'm just using it for basic stuff, so if I'm just using it for basic activities like web browsing or or just watching YouTube, watching Netflix, I charge it 2 days once. And if I'm actually editing throughout the whole day, my battery runs out around the evening. So if I start around 10 in the morning editing, if I continue editing, the battery runs out to about 20% around 6 to 7 p.m. Of course, the battery consumption increases when I'm exporting video, so I have to keep that in mind. So I have to start exporting my video at about 40%. If my MacBook is at 20%, I can't export videos. And of course, I don't use my MacBook plugged in, so I usually wait for it to charge finish. So this MacBook takes about 1.5 hours to from 0 to 100. I have personally never let this MacBook totally down to 0. The lowest I have actually brought this MacBook down is up to 5%. Please don't follow that, because that's a really bad battery practice and it's going to harm your battery in the long run. With that, I want to show you guys my battery health on this MacBook. I've got coconut battery open here, so it's really reliable, and in these 6 months my MacBook has actually dropped around 1.4%. Yep. So it's at 98.6% battery health. With me pushing this MacBook to its limits, the battery cycle of this MacBook is 86, so it's actually pretty good, because some days when I don't edit, like I said, I actually charge my MacBook once every 2 days, or sometimes I've even charged my MacBook once in 3 days. But that was during me using just YouTube and just basic stuff, not really editing. That's actually my review for this MacBook here. I've actually said what I wanted to say, and there isn't really any issues here in this MacBook except for the swap usage. At this point, I have actually stopped caring about this swap usage. It's actually going to happen on this first gen Apple Silicon MacBook. So when I started using the MacBook, I was actually opening the activity monitor around 10 to 20 times a day and checking on my swap usage. But after that, I gradually stopped, because the swap usage is bad and we all know it, and we can't really do anything about it unless you get the new MacBooks. And talking about this new MacBook, I'm also not sure if the swap usage is bad on that, or if Apple has fixed that. We gotta wait and see. So now onto the verdict. Should you get this MacBook, or should you just get the M1 Pro or the M1 Max? If you have the money to go for the M1 Pro or the M1 Max, just go for it, because those are definitely like 100 times better than this MacBook, and you should just go for it. And for those of you thinking to get a 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro, you guys should definitely go for it also. If money is an issue to you, you should go for the M1 base model 13-inch MacBook Pro, because this is also a powerhouse machine. So you guys don't have to be skeptical about getting it or not. And this MacBook is a powerhouse. Of course, this might not be as powerful as the 14-inch or the new 16-inch M1 Pro and M1 X, but this is definitely a powerful machine. And if you guys are planning to buy it, if you all get some good deals on Amazon, if you get good offers, please do go for it and get these MacBooks. I hope this video has helped some of you guys, those of you planning to get these M1 MacBook Pros now, since after the M1 Pro and the M1 Max chips have come out. And for those of you having questions that I've not addressed in this video, do leave them in the comments below, and I'll be sure to check them out and reply to you guys. So with that, we actually come to the end of this video. So if you guys like this video, do remember to click the like button. Do remember to subscribe to this channel. That will be really supportive. And with that, we've come to the end of this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.